Hi, it's Esosa. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, perfect.
Okay. I thought I was the second panel. Man.
So we're getting started with our first panel. I'm Lauren Washington. I'm the co-founder of Black Women Talk Tech, as well as funder.
I'm Esosa Ighodaro. I'm the co-founder of Black Women Talk Tech, as well as Mass Grant.
And Leyonna.
Oh, hi, I'm Leyonna Barba. I am I'm an executive director at JPMorgan in our Tech and Disruptive Commerce group. So I just want to say it's truly an honor for us at JPMorgan Chase to partner with the Black Women Talk Tech for today's virtual conference. While we're in uncertain times, it's important that we continue to uplift Black entrepreneurs and lend our support and resources to one another where we can. And Black Women Talk Tech has brought us together today to do just that. So we thank you for having us and for creating a platform dedicated to connecting and growing Black female businesses in tech. JPMorgan Chase launched the Advancing Black Pathways program last year to help Black people close historical achievement gaps in three key areas: wealth creation, education outcomes, and career success. As part of this investment, we're hiring Black talent, developing Black leadership, and investing in Black businesses and households to improve the financial health of Black communities across the country. Through our focus on wealth, we're working to help Black people get on a path to financial success through increased savings, better access to home ownership, and the tools and resources they need to launch and grow businesses. We're truly committed to providing opportunities for Black businesses and communities to build wealth because we know what's at stake if we don't. If current wealth trends persist, Black people are on track to have a median net worth of zero by 2053. As America's largest bank, we believe it is our responsibility to invest our resources in putting more Black Americans on a path to financial success. That's why we're using our visibility and size to promote financial habits that will build long-term savings, wealth, and resilience. To learn more about Advancing Black Pathways, visit our website at www.jpmorganchase.com/ABP. So with that, let's kick off this panel. Esosa and Lauren, maybe you can just give a little bit more background about your business careers as founders and how you are adjusting your own businesses in today's economic environment.
Of course, so I'll get started. So as I mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders of Black Women Talk Tech, but I also run another company called Funder, and we are a platform that helps automate and simplify the investing process for early stage founders and angel investors. And so I think for us, particularly at Black Women Talk Tech, we are an event-based business, and obviously events are not happening. And so our big pivot is this, right? And I think we've been seeing this a lot for a lot of people who have been doing events. They're now moving over to virtual different summits. And even those who haven't done events are now seeing this as an opportunity to sort of dip their toes in the water and see if this makes sense for them. So for us, in the meantime, while we wait and see what happens, this is what we're doing to sort of fill the gap and making sure that we are still getting information out to all of our founders who are going through a really tough time right now. I think for us, that's always the main mission, is to make sure that we're helping each other sort of build up our businesses. I'd say for Funder, it's a really interesting time for us because we are automating a process that hasn't been automated before. So if you think about the investing process, it is all warm introductions and pitch meetings and coffee dates. There's a lot of in-person nature to it. And for us, it's sort of like a great time because everyone is looking for a way to sort of shift that. And how do I still do due diligence and evaluate and discovery for my investments when I don't have that in-person opportunity anymore? So we've been able to sort of push our platform a little bit more and say, like, this is the way that you can do this during this time, and then hopefully incorporate this in through after COVID.
Esosa, what about you?
Yeah, so my name is Esosa Ighodaro. I'm the other co-founder of Black Women Talk Tech. I recently just started a company called Mass Grant. I started Mass Grant with the idea that, now that there's all these things happening, my family is mostly in healthcare. And so my mom works in healthcare, my sister, my cousins, like literally everyone. And then, this pandemic happens, and then I find out that they don't have enough PPE, which is protective gear. While they're at work. And so I wanted to figure out a way to kind of support healthcare workers who are like the frontline staff to help our family and friends who've either contracted the disease or who's really trying to protect us, right? And so I wanted to figure out a way to do that with some of the relationships or things that I had. And so I decided to create Mass Grant, a grant platform that allows medical supply buyers and sellers to connect and transact while doing some good. So what we do is, as you buy your, medical supplies, whether it's PPE, masks, goggles, all the protective gear, Mass Grant will donate to a local hospital so that they can also have the protection they need. And so, I'm definitely one of those people who was kind of working through my last company, which was Nextstar, where I was helping to automate the process for influencer marketing campaigns. And I decided to make that shift more recently as I kind of realized some of the market conditions and what that would kind of alleviate, what will happen in the next couple of months. Would I really be able to survive, right? And so I kind of asked myself a couple of questions just to get my self going, to understand whether I should really continue on with this business or switch. And I decided to make that switch. So I'm sure we're going to talk at length with some of the reasons and how I've done it. So I'll stop there for now.
Okay. Well, Lauren, let's start off with you, and Esosa definitely chime in on this first question. But why should founders take this time to prepare to change? Like, why prepare for change right now in particular?
Yeah, I think every company is going through some kind of change, right? Whether it's your business model and you're doing a full real pivot, whether it's pulling your team remotely, whether it's just pivoting your expectations in terms of what is happening for your business and where it's going to go. I think everyone is dealing with some kind of pivot right now. And so being ready mentally, financially, organizationally, operationally, just understanding all those pieces is incredibly important, because everything that we're seeing is saying that this is not going to be over in another couple months, right? This is going to affect your business and the economy for years to come. And so how are you preparing your business for that and making sure that you're ready to take those challenges on? I think one of the good things about being an entrepreneur, and particularly being a Black woman entrepreneur, is that you're used to strife and you're used to things being hard, and you have to work hard, and sort of shifting those expectations and pivoting is sort of in your blood a little bit. And so I think for us, where we have that mindset already, but still being able to understand that your business may never look the same, at least mentally, is one of the things you have to start working on.
Yeah, I would agree with the same sentiments. I think when you see new market conditions, that's definitely going to have a direct impact on what you're going to do, especially as a business, and how you're able to still extract and provide value for your customer base, right? Especially when it's unsure. So you're seeing so many things in the marketplace, from changed human behavior, right? Doing new things that they never had to. We see a lot of new parents that are becoming teachers at home, right? Like, wouldn't it be great if we had, some other ed tech platforms to help support those type of new experiences, right? So there's just so much change that you just got to kind of do that assessment to make sure that you are providing enough value in a clear resource way to your customers. And so that's the only thing I would add, to really consider all the things that can make a difference with your business today. I would even also recommend this documentary I recently watched called The Food That Made America Great. And I thought it was really interesting in that documentary, because a lot of those founders really, like the Hanes, the Mars, the M&Ms of the world, and how they built their companies and how do they manage through unsure times, and weathered essentially the storm. So I would give you that little nugget to just gain some inspiration and understanding of how people are doing. And also Madam CJ Walker, and how she's kind of leveled up and figured out how to become, the first millionaire founder.
So let's stay with you for a second. When do you know it's time? Like, what are the metrics or the gauges that tell you it's time to pivot, or maybe it's time to just quit that endeavor completely, right? Maybe it's not pivotable. Is it team? Is it your investor base? Is it just having liquidity and funding in general? Like, what are some of the things that you thought through as you went through your process?
Good question. I think part of what the challenge is as an entrepreneur is just kind of figuring out what's working, and and you not getting in the way of really seeing the metrics, right? Like, for a long time, you're trying to figure out this value to a certain target group, and sometimes, what I find very interesting about the COVID pandemic, what it's done for a lot of business owners is it's really kind of expedited what they expedited if their business was really going to last or not too. So it's a real kind of writing on the wall to see, like, how could you shape or make your business be meaningful by either expanding services, or how do you kind of think about it in a way where you're truly doing an introspective look and seeing if your business is really relevant anymore and can still stay relevant for the next 24 to 36 months, which they say, this will last for that long. And so I took that kind of look. I really looked at the marketplace. I'm trying to, I'm always trying to consider, is there too much competition where I am currently, right? Is my company always playing catch up? I'd ask myself, what are the kind of shifts that are happening that are negatively impacting my business, and truly sometimes it could just be your perspective has changed on what that landscape is, right? What kind of problem you're solving in that industry. So for me, I felt like I needed to make a shift because influencer marketing in the industry, it's kind of null right now for the most part. And it's been really tough to kind of get people to change their budgets or shift their budgets to, paying for content from influencers in this way, especially in this time. So I said, what's going to make the difference, and what can I provide that's like important enough to me and would be a real need currently, and I can like get a little bit more momentum right early on. And I thought about protecting my family, right? And so that was something that I felt very passionate about and wanted to figure out ways I can help. And so that's how I kind of, stepped into that idea and thought through kind of what are some things I needed to do really quickly to get that tested and seeing if someone really would want that. So I started kind of lining up how much time did I have, right? So I was like, okay, I have, maybe about 6 or so months before, it's over. So let's figure out if I can do something else that's more meaningful in the meantime, and I can, capitalize on ways to support in a meaningful way. And so I wanted to figure out really in the short term, how do I get cash in the door fast enough and help someone at the same time? And so I came up with that concept, and that's really kind of helped propel me forward in terms of leveraging what resources that I have today that could make a difference within 7 to 14 days. Like, I wanted to really make sure it was gaining traction as early as that, and then that would give me an indicator if I should move forward in the first 30 to 90 days to kind of check in and see, is it really working? And if it's not, don't be afraid. Try something else and try to make sure that you're creating real value for your customer base. Because I think sometimes it's hard to get, you get caught up in the minutia of building something, and you find out sometimes a little too late that you're building something that doesn't work, or you're not listening to some of the signs. And sometimes as entrepreneurs, sometimes your vision needs to shift a little bit so that so it can really start to take shape. And so I think those are the things I would say in terms of, figuring out what are your main missions, your first top line milestones, and then communicating that to your team, your investors, your customers, and asking them for help. Like, I think that was what I found most helpful, is that I was able to line up exactly what I wanted to do. I needed to connect to hospitals. I needed to connect to corporates and, foundations who would be interested in supporting frontline workers. And those are my two asks. And I got a huge rush of people wanting to help, especially during the times. And so that's what I would say is important in this situation.
And then Lauren, on the back of that, for those companies that have investors, how do you pitch a pivot to them of the existing business, or, because I think that can be, it's hard enough as Black women, right, to get the initial funding for our idea, let alone when you start to make changes to the idea, right? So what are your thoughts around that? And like, what are you seeing given where you sit?
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely say right now, investors are sympathetic, right? They understand what's happening and what's going on. So they know that there's going to be shifts and changes. I will say now, and even in the past before, a pivot should never be a surprise to your investors. Like, you should be talking to them about your business. They should understand how you're growing, how you're not growing, where your struggles are, what you're thinking, so that when you do present a pivot, it's not out of left field, right? And they don't feel like they're blindsided and they have to make this quick decision on whether they want to stay with the business or reinvest or be a part of this whole new vision. So I think often what happens is that founders take this money and then they run, right? And they're just working on their business heads down, but that investor is your partner, right? They're the ones that is supposed to be helping you along the way. So making sure that they're a part of all of these decisions and all these conversations is really important.
And just piggybacking on that, Lauren, how much money should you have, right? If you're in the middle, or as you evaluate where you are currently with your business, as you are thinking, maybe I need to make a shift because my customer base, the behavioral patterns are changing. Like, do you need 6 months worth of money, 8 months, 12 months? Like, and especially in an economic environment where, to be honest, we really don't know how long this is going to last. And we don't know what the long-term impacts will be on consumer behavior or business behavior, right? So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think the good rule of thumb that we always hear is 18 months of runway, right? Do you have enough to last about a year and a half? I think that's obviously a little bit different right now. Like, I think the question is, for a lot of businesses, like, can you keep the lights on, right? Can you make it to the next month? And I think that's fair. And I think that's fine for now. It depends for every business, right? Every business is really different. Your cash flow is different. If you know that the summers are great for you and you're going to get a huge chunk of money in the summer that can take you a little bit longer, then I think that's something you have to think about. If you know that you have a pretty consistent cash flow and that cash flow is going down every single month, then that's really a time where you need to start evaluating and saying, do I need to pivot and bring in a different revenue stream? Or is this something that I can sort of ride out because I have some cash reserves? So it really depends on your business. And it also depends on your risk tolerance, right? Your ability to kind of ride that. Like, if you're comfortable waiting and seeing what happens, and you feel financially secure enough to do something like that, that's your business, and you have to make those decisions yourself. But generally understanding, how long can you make it, and what does your cash flow normally look like, and how is COVID impacting that cash flow, and being honest about all those things is really important.
Okay. So going back to you, so pivots should never be a surprise for investors. Who do you go to for advice? Because obviously there is the ability to trust instinct, right? In terms of, this isn't working. These gauges are saying that this isn't the right thing. I need to make a switch. But what are your advisors, and who are those advisors and mentors that you talk to, right? Because every founder and situation, right, it's already a lonely place in and of itself. And even as a banker, I can't relate to being a founder complete 100%. So, like, who are you talking to? Who are you getting advice from? And how are they helping to shape in terms of how you think about these types of things?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think one of the biggest things that has really helped me in and just generally with my career is I always have kind of a personal board of directors, which I would say my personal advisory board, right? Who's checking in on me, who really I can ask the hard questions to and have them really give me clear advice and not, niceties, and really try to help me kind of navigate certain obstacles. And I think when it comes to really figuring out how do I lean on people who have my experiences, I think Black Women Talk Tech has been a really pivotal point for me because I get to reach out to all of my different founders that I've met through Black Women Talk Tech and ask them what's happening with them. How are you navigating COVID right now with your business, and how are you thinking about leveraging some of the connections you have to like stay afloat? Because I think one of the hard parts, for Black women especially, um, it's no surprise that we're not getting funding dollars through venture capital in the alarming rates, right? We're on average we're raising about 36,000 per startup, right? And that was from the Project Diane report, right, a few years back. And so what we were luckily able to rely on is our actual revenue. Revenue was coming in. We're able to kind of create a business that worked. And the hard part now is that when those things have slowed, what is your recourse, right? And how are you managing through some of those challenging moments? And I think outside of just talking to my board of directors of folks that I always kind of ask, what should I do? How should I manage? Peer groups and communities have been literally the saving grace because they're going to tell you, hey, I found out about this grant program, you should apply. Oh, or here, I know about this community bank that's talking about loans specifically for your profile. Here you go. Like a lot of resources and opportunities come from those peers, and I think that's the top two things that I've seen. Everyone's really willing to help during these times because they know it's tough for business owners and their employees and the people who work for them as well, right? Because everyone's trying to figure out how to be relevant and provide a valued business in exchange so that everyone's can see that money flow and allow you to live a good life, right? And so I think part of what I found really helpful and the piece of advice that I've gotten from advisors is to, kind of do some research around like what's working now, right? What industries are because of this, pandemic, are doing exceedingly well, and figure out what is it that you can either bring that is unique or new, or how you can attach yourself or bring something expanded in your business that can pull out some interesting things. And I would say like supply chain management is a very huge, hairy, industry that is getting a lot of play right now. And there's a lot of opportunities to disrupt and change things. Or even in education tech, people are really looking for ways to, have better ways of supporting the educational aspect for their children, especially. I'm seeing a lot of things happening in junior high and lower grades. I'm seeing a ton of things happening just what we're doing right now, doing virtual conferences and all these different things. And so there's a ton of different ways where people are becoming relevant. That is where I thought was a really good space to start, and then figure out how you could provide value, right? So that's how I would answer that.
Lauren, what are your thoughts in terms of like who are the people that, especially as a founder, also advising other companies, like who do you tell them to talk to, and what type of advice have you received, and what advice are you giving, especially now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say the same things that Esosa said. We're really leaning very heavily on our board right now. I mean, they've been so incredible in terms of giving support and opening up their Rolodex and like really being able to help us think through some of these changes. And then the peer groups are so important too. I mean, we started Black Women Talk Tech because having peers around you who are doing what you're doing and can support you is so important on your entrepreneurial journey. You cannot do it alone. And you need to make sure that you have people who understand what you're going through, who can take you to that next step. And I think now more than ever, that's really important. I've gotten so many notes and texts from my other entrepreneur friends who just get it. They know what I'm going through and they're asking like, how are you? How can I help? What can you do? Let's get on a phone call. And same for them, right? So I think understanding the power of those peer groups is really important. Don't step away from them thinking that, oh, they're going through something hard, I shouldn't reach out. You should really make sure that you're making those connections because you never know what's going to come from them.
No, that's
Oh,
amazing.
and just one more thing. I realized, and while Lauren was speaking, I thought about a thing that happened with a group of my friends where they had a little mini intervention for me, and they literally just pour in to you, right? And say, okay, what ideas do you have? Okay, let me help you with this, or how do we think about what would make sense for you in these ways? So really like set up an hour with your closest friends or business besties and allow them to pour into you and you say, hey, this is an issue I'm having. What do you think I should do, right? And you'll be surprised how many different ideas that will start to come alive in terms of resources and points of direction. So I would encourage everybody just to try to do like a small group of, three to five people, and then take turns pouring into each other because it makes such a difference, especially as you think through how stressful this time is. I think it's a really good, it's a hug. It's like a little virtual hug. So go ahead and do a little sister circle.
It sounds like what both of you are saying is you have to say something. Like, don't sit there and try to figure it out by yourself, because
exactly.
that can be a resource. And if they don't have the answer, they can find someone to help you find the answer.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, we're going to do one more question before we open it up to our attendees. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat so we can ask Lauren and Esosa. But the last question before we go to the chat would be, pivot. Typically, when you hear the word pivot, right, it sounds like it's a big, major change. But reinvention can be very subtle, right? So how quickly can you reposition in order to take advantage of a new market opportunity, especially like some of the market opportunities, Esosa, you mentioned that are coming out of today's environment, right? And generate those new revenue streams. That's open to either one, whoever wants to start.
Yeah, I'll say in tech, especially, it's really easy to pivot, right? Especially if you have developers and you have technical talent on your team. That's what we're here for. We're supposed to be agile. We're supposed to be able to shift and move as quickly as possible. I think you're right in terms of the fact that a pivot doesn't have to be major, right? You can do little sort of challenges or little tests as you go. You don't have to completely shut your business down and start something new if that's not what you want to do or you're not comfortable with that, right? Like you can always do sort of tiny little pilots as you go along to test things without completely blowing things up, right? So I love that idea. I think that's something that we've been doing at Funder, is saying, we're getting some interesting feedback in this area. This is something that people seem to be interested in. It's not our normal business model, but is that something that we can push forward through? Let's test it. Let's talk to more people. Let's see if we get some bites there without having to say we're scrapping everything.
And I think also for me, I was like, and don't be afraid to scrap everything too, right? I know it's daunting. I mean, I can imagine, all the sweat, tears, and all the work you've done in the past is, mounted into this. If you can't figure out a way to shift to survive the next 24 months, at least to kind of consider, like, if you're truly weathering the storm here, I would definitely encourage, like, thinking about the opportunities to switch into something unique and new. I think the interesting thing about tech is that it is super, agile, and there's just that speed to to the demand that you need to really reach quickly. So I would say as soon as you possibly can, get out there. I mean, to get a website up, you can get that in 24 hours, right? You can get, or even less, with your idea, communicating that and getting folks on board with your current relationships and customer base and people you know that could support you. But I think it's super important. Speed is the name of the game, right? When it comes to entering into a new market and being able to support people in a way they need to be expanding. You know, you do see that level of expansion happening also with retailers, right? You see retailers who used to make socks, they're making masks now, right? Or, you know, Louis Vuitton or all of these really luxury designers are making masks that are like 40, 50 bucks, you know, like all of these different people are reinventing themselves to stay alive. And, you know, small businesses are no different. But I think it's super important that whatever you think of it quickly, research it, test it really quickly, and run like the wind. Speed is the best also invention to kind of test and see, you know, if that innovation is truly working and what you have. I mean, some people are literally, you know, this pandemic has really pushed them to come up with solutions that are way better than the ideas they came up with before. And so it's having them think through real problem solving and solutions that support today's environment and even future concepts. Because I think it's not enough just to think about today, but how does this evolve, or how is this going to have the lasting and staying power for forevermore?
I think that's an interesting point you made about move quickly, right? In terms of, you know, do the research, do your homework, and then make your decision and then test, right? And we have a question from Nicole, and I think this is interesting just because you also want to be very careful with your dollars in terms of ensuring that you don't lose them, because obviously there's a lot of fraud and other things going on in the marketplace as well, right? People take advantage of the people during these types of crises in the market. But Nicole in particular, you know, she says that she started working on a mobile app in India, but due to everything that's happened with the pandemic, she had to cease development. She has the source code, and it's about 80% complete. She wants to know, how do you find a reputable and trustful developer in the States, or really anywhere in the world? I would say, I would just make that global. Like, how do you find someone that you can trust from a developer, right? Which is a very important piece of your tech. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I'll jump in. First of all, I'll say, Nicole, we have all been there. So I think going overseas and doing development is very tough, especially if you don't have a very clear picture of what you're working on, and you don't have the technical skill set yourself, because there's that language barrier. There is definitely the opportunity for people to take advantage of you. So really understanding what your skill sets are to go overseas. I know it sounds like a great deal all the time, but there's a reason why it costs like 10% of what the US prices are. So I would say, in terms of finding a reputable developer, it's tough for early stage startups, especially if you don't have money to pay them in the States. I mean, the costs are much higher and the demand is much higher, right? So there's a lot of people who are out here who are developers, and they're getting offers all day, every day to come work on their company for money, for equity, for whatever, right? They're getting thrown opportunities at them. And so you really have to sort of look at that whole process as, I always think about it as dating, right? Like, talk to them a few times, making sure that that person is really in it for you and for the project that you're doing, right? Give them tests to take, right? Making sure that they can actually develop what you want them to develop, right? So don't jump directly into a developer relationship. I know you want to sort of move quickly, but you need to make sure that that person is really trustworthy, and that you know that they're going to be on your side and want the best for your business long term. Because if you have to continue to start over and over and over again with new developers, it's worse than taking a couple weeks or a couple months to find the right one who will be with you long term.
I would definitely echo those same thoughts and sentiments. I mean, sentiment. I cannot tell you how many developer disasters. It's a hard road, especially if you're a non-technical founder like myself and many people I'm sure in this room. It is incredibly important to build that relationship with that developer. And if for whatever reason, the developers in India can't continue work with you or figure out some type of lean strategy for them to complete it in some way, if not, so that you can have something to use and it's relevant, especially if it's relevant for now. If not, it's really difficult, even when you do get a new developer, because most developers don't like working from other people's code. So they're like, oh, well, I think it's broken for a lot of reasons, right? They'll look at your tech stack and they'll give you all the hum and aha. When I tell you I have been through developer mayhem is not a game. And so I definitely know a ton of different resources in terms of being able to connect with other developers, where you can either, the standard, going to different meetups virtually now, since all the meetups are virtual, it's a lot easier to connect with people. And I would even say that in general, like if you wanted to connect with people in general, people are actually responding now because they can't go nowhere, right? And so they're open to a new conversation. I've gotten an opportunity to meet with even, certain corporations that I've never gotten a chance to talk to in the past, or just never worked out in the past too. So I would say consider those things and figure out if there's opportunities also for you to look within your network and say, hey, anyone who's like working as a developer, maybe for a big corporation like a JPMorgan or someone else who is can have some spare time working with you just to kind of help you finish up as well. I've seen those type of relationships work well on their the side as well. So I would try to kind of look into your network and see who is possibly has the actual type of code you're developing as well, to match and see if they can help you out, because it's always one of those harder things that you kind of have to manage through. And that's how I would kind of approach it. And also just, send email blasts to all the different listservs and saying, hey, you're looking for someone to partner with you, and maybe, exchange some equity or exchange something that will, whet their beak enough to want to work with you long term.
And I'll jump into another really great resource to finding developers is AngelList. And I always say that because that is a community for people who understand what it's like to be in a startup and want to work in startups, right? So like Esosa said, going to the places where they're at is really important. And AngelList, I've had a lot of really great success on there in terms of finding people who are willing to work for equity or who are looking for like these big projects to join. So that's a really good resource as well.
Okay, well, that's a great question, and obviously it sounds like, and given all the chat that came after that in the queue, I can see that a lot of women are very much dealing with a similar issue, or reliving their own horror stories. It sounds like. So our next question comes from Sherry. She's a very new startup, and she has a two-part question. The first one, and so I'll put this one to you. Is it too soon to slightly pivot just to remain relevant? Like, given we're still pretty early, even though I know it feels like we've been in the house for months on end, but is it too soon to pivot?
For me, I'm one of those people who I will do what's working. So for me, if your vision isn't fully baked yet, or you have to, because a lot of times what people don't realize too, when you come up with an idea, ideas are just ideas. It's just a thought that has potential, right? And so how do you make that idea like something that's recognizable and realized? Is if you can have the outside world tell you back that, yes, this is working. And the only way for you to do that is to test, right? And so if it's relevant enough whereby you can get so much traction today, people are chasing traction, and it's never going to be a company that really will work. And if you can find something that's working today, that means you have something that's legitimate, that there is an actual supply and demand. There is a real need for your business. You can actually create actual value for them in exchange for greenbacks. You should do it. Like, I think but again, that's just my point of view and a way of kind of looking at business, because business is really just a means of truly creating some type of value in exchange that, oh my gosh, you made my life so much easier. I'm going to give you money to keep doing that, right? Or some way of streamlining, right? Because a lot of people are chasing a product market fit. And if you can get that today, I would encourage it fully.
Okay. And then Sherry's the second part of her question, and Lauren, this is to you. Are you finding that funding startups are on hold, especially given she's a very new startup?
So no, it's not on hold. There are actually, I would say most of investors are still investing. You just have to understand that what they're investing in is going to be different, right? Or what they're looking for in terms of your metrics or traction might be a little bit different, right? Everyone is sort of feeling this. And so looking in the long term in terms of investing, they have to sort of account for what might come and how the economy is going to change. But I will say in terms of investors, they are still investing. If you look at accelerators, almost all of them are still doing their accelerator classes. They're shifting them virtual, which is great. It means that there's more opportunity for people to join who can't pick up and move to Silicon Valley or New York or wherever they're located. So that's a huge opportunity. I will say in terms of early stage investing though, your goal should not be to go out and invest and just find money, right? Like your goal is, like Esosa said, to find that product market fit and build a business, right? Make sure that you're bringing money in, because when you actually have money in your startup, your position and your power when you're talking to investors is completely different, right? And so especially for Black women, we know that there's a huge funding gap. We know it's a lot harder for us. And so you have to come in, unfortunately, a little bit further along in your first steps than other people might have to. That doesn't mean you don't start the conversations. It doesn't mean you don't build the relationships or put feelers out there, but just shifting those expectations and knowing that you're building a business that's sustainable with or without funding is really important, especially right now.
That's great advice. Our next question comes from Barbara. And Esosa, I think this one will go to both of you, but Esosa, I think you struck a nerve with the education tech comment you had made earlier. So Barbara wants to know, do you think there's a market, because a lot of the focus has been really on the K through 12, given the homeschooling, but do you think that there's a market for tech education for the 20 to 30-year-olds? And do you think online training and certification is important in the new marketplace?
Okay, well, let me just start by saying the number one thing I've seen out there that people are spinning out is definitely like these e-courses that I'm such a big fan of, because it's literally anything that you have a skill set in, whether it's like learning soft skills, or I'll teach you how to fundraise, or I'll teach you how to literally fill in the blank. I've seen people literally teach other people in a course of like how to create candied apples. I was like, how is there a market for that? How? Because there's YouTube, so I don't even understand it. But she did 60,000 in 30 days. And that was incredible, just seeing, how people are really grasping this whole idea and of being able to learn at home, right? Because they're having to stay at home, they're bored, right? They're either gonna better themselves or entertain themselves, right? And so one of the ways that I've seen education really skyrocket is these kind of new online courses to kind of teach you something. And I myself, in this last 2 months, of the things I've purchased, I didn't buy any clothes or anything like that, but I did buy courses, right? Because I'm always trying to self-improve and like, hey, I have some extra time on the weekend before I decided to do this business. I was like learning and getting inspiration through what people were doing. And so I find that's a really good target market right now, especially right now because Facebook the ads cost about 40% less because less people are doing advertising right now. So you're getting ads for 2 for 1. Listen, go ahead and do it, because I think it's worth your time and investment to kind of see, hey, self, what can I teach people? And you'd be surprised some of the basic things, that even just mindset around what you need to be when you're trying to start a business, and how you kind of trend that is so important. And so I would definitely say, like, that's one of the things where I'm seeing a huge trend in education, tech or online courses, whether it's like just creating a course and going on like a Udemy or Teachable or one of those things, or just creating your own like little live webinar on Webinar Jam, where we are with now. And so I've seen so many people do really well with that, where they're packaging what they know and putting like maybe an ebook or a template that they charge a nominal fee, $25 to $50, and they're making a couple of grand. Even as a side hustle, that's a good way to kind of fund your startup today, even if that wasn't your main hustle. So I definitely would encourage that.
Yeah. No, that's true. I signed up today, I think, for like an online course about how to braid hair, because obviously, given the current environment, I can't see my stylist at the moment. It's the natural is hard to maintain, so it'd be nice to be able to do something that's a little easier. But I paid $8 for that class.
Listen.
Listen. Yeah. We're gonna this is our last question, and we need to wrap up. So Cammie, it comes from Cammie. She's a retailer, and her customers have stopped shopping. She started doing content, and the customers are loving the content. However, I think Esosa, as you mentioned, content is hard to monetize right now in this environment. Do you guys have any suggestions on ways she could attempt to monetize that?
Yeah, so content can be hard to monetize, but I think now that we are at the point where we know that this is our reality for a little while, like people are willing to sort of shift their mindset on that. So I recently saw a stat that said that people are paying on average $29 for virtual events right now. So they are paying for it if they feel like there is some kind of benefit or value that they're getting out of it. And I also think in terms of sponsors, they are now sort of shifting their strategies as well in terms of where they're putting their dollars. So I think a couple months ago, that was tough, right? Because everyone saw virtual events as like secondary to in-person events. But now that we know that this is our new normal for at least the time being, I think everyone's mindset is sort of shifting in terms of like what Esosa was saying, I need to do something, right? And if I have to pay for something that is going to either better myself or give me the skill sets that I need, or really just be something that's enjoyable, right? I think people are willing to pay for it. You just have to make sure that you're putting that value out there so that they understand what they're paying for.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I would say to add to that is it's also important to understand what type of content, right? So if you can figure out a way to create evergreen content like a course on your retail product that's like adjacent or relevant content that uses your retail item. You didn't say what kind it was, so I can't be as specific, but it would be interesting because I've seen people also sell that as like an ebook or a downloadable thing, which is like this thing where it's just always there for someone to buy and download, like your own personal mini book series, or just as relevant as it is for people who are now working from home and having to look presentable on a screen. I've seen people do courseworks around, how to present on screen and how to like set up your space, right? Because it's a whole new normal, right? How do I still kind of climb the upwardly mobile now this way, right? And so I think there's just so many ways you can kind of be creative to support your business moving forward, and looking at video or downloadable evergreen content as a stream of making money in the meantime, before you find something that can actually maybe deliver to home, like the Uber Eats for food. Maybe there is like the shipped kind of idea for your store that could possibly happen, but definitely definitely reach out. We can do a little session.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Esosa. Thank you, one, for just having this event in general. Obviously, as you can see from the questions we're getting, lots of people are engaged and, want to find this type of support group and help. So the 3 things I heard out of today's message is 1, do your research and know your customer and your end markets. 2, utilize your networks, both professionally and personally. Because obviously you need that mental support and you can do it to push forward. And then 3, just go do it. So I would say those are the takeaways that I saw from today. Again, I think, we know that it's a critical time for all businesses and particularly for Black businesses. And so, again, I just want to reiterate that the Advancing Black Pathways initiative at JPMorgan is committed to supporting Black communities. And we've adjusted our 2020 strategy to focus on helping Black entrepreneurs, students, families, and individuals get access to critical resources at a crucial time. Our new COVID-19 resource website provides timely insights and tools to help individuals and small business owners manage the economic implications of this pandemic. And I'll put this in the chat as well, the website where you can go for the Advancing Black Pathways COVID-19 resource website. So you can have that as a tool to utilize. So again, thank you very much for your time, and thank you all for being engaged with great questions.
Thank you.